I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts. I always assumed cheating was something that happened to other people, people in miserable marriages, people who had drifted apart, people who ignored the warning signs. But here I am. My name is Jake, and I've been married to Emily for 11 years. We met when she was working in sales, all charm and ambition, the kind of woman who could walk into any room and own it. I fell hard. We had the kind of love people write books about, passionate, deep, the real thing. At least, I thought so. But lately, something had been off. At first, it was little things. She started working late more often, her phone was always face down, and when I'd ask about her day, she'd give me vague, one-word answers. Then there were the mood swings. One day, she'd be affectionate and sweet, the next, she'd act like I was a burden. I chalked it up to stress. Her company had gone through some restructuring, and a new guy, Paul, had taken over her department. She mentioned him a few times, too many times, if I'm being honest. Always in passing, always casual. Paul had a great idea for the marketing campaign, or Paul thinks we should push for more outreach. Paul. I should have seen it then. I thought a surprise would bring us closer. Our anniversary was coming up, and I wanted to remind her of what we had. So, I booked a weekend getaway, just the two of us, no work, no distractions. When I told her, she hesitated. That sounds amazing, babe, but work is insane right now, she said, not meeting my eyes. Come on, Em. Just a couple of days. We need this. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Okay. Let me see if I can move some things around. That was my first real clue. The woman who used to drop everything to be with me now needed to move things around. I should have known then. I told myself I was overthinking things. Marriages go through rough patches, right? Work stress, life stress, it all builds up. Maybe I hadn't been as attentive as I used to be. Maybe I was just paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. A week before our anniversary trip, Emily's behavior got even stranger. She was suddenly obsessed with her appearance, new clothes, new lingerie, even a fresh haircut. When I told her she looked beautiful, she barely reacted, just gave me a distracted smile and kept scrolling through her phone. That damn phone. She was glued to it, smiling at texts she wouldn't let me see, stepping out of the room to take work calls at odd hours. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd roll her eyes and say, Jesus, Jake, do I need to give you a full report every time I answer my phone? That's when the pit in my stomach really started to form. Then, 2 days before our trip, I walked into the kitchen while she was on the phone. She didn't hear me at first. Her voice was soft, almost playful. I miss you too. Can't wait to see you again. I froze. She turned and saw me, her face draining of color so fast you'd think I caught her holding a gun. Oh, hey, babe. That was just, Rebecca from work. She's going through some things. Rebecca from work. The same Rebecca she once called a corporate robot with the personality of a stapler. She knew I didn't believe her. I didn't even have to say anything. Jake, come on, don't look at me like that. You're being ridiculous. I wasn't. I knew it then. Something was happening, something she wasn't telling me. And I was done pretending not to see it. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying that phone call in my head, the way her voice softened, how quickly she scrambled for an excuse. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But that pit in my stomach wouldn't go away. The next day, I decided I needed proof. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was being paranoid. Or maybe, just maybe, my gut was right. Emily had been spending a lot of time on her laptop lately. She never used to care about locking it, but now. Password protected. Same with her phone. But here's the thing, people are creatures of habit. I knew her old password, and I had a hunch she hadn't changed it completely, just tweaked it. I tried a few variations. Wrong. Wrong. And then, bingo. I was in. My hands were shaking as I opened her messages. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Work emails, a few texts from friends. And then I saw a chat thread labeled Paul, work. My stomach dropped. I clicked. The first thing I saw was a message from him, sent just that morning. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. I'll see you tonight. And then her response. I miss you already. I hate that we have to hide this. 2 months today, red heart. 2 months. 2 months. My vision blurred. My ears rang. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. It wasn't just an emotional affair. It wasn't just flirting. My wife had been sneaking around with another man, her boss, for 2 months. While I was planning a surprise anniversary trip, she was celebrating some pathetic milestone with him. I scrolled up. The messages went back weeks. Late-night confessions, inside jokes, pet names. Things she hadn't said to me in a long time. And the worst part? The photos. Selfies in bed, half-dressed. One of them at a restaurant, the same one I had taken her to for our last anniversary. I had seen enough. I closed the laptop, my hands clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have woken her up and demanded answers. But no. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. If she had a 2-month anniversary to celebrate with him, then I was going to crash the party. I spent the next day in a fog. I went through the motions, showered, got dressed, even answered a few work emails, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. Every time I looked at Emily, I felt sick. She acted normal, like nothing was wrong. She kissed me on the cheek before heading to work, told me she'd be home late because of meetings. I nodded, forcing myself to stay calm. Okay, babe. Hope it's not too stressful. She smiled, like she actually believed I was that naive. It will be, but Paul's making sure we all stay on top of things. Paul. I gritted my teeth, but I played my role perfectly. Let her think I was clueless. The moment she left, I started tracking her. See, Emily and I had used a location-sharing app for years. It started as a safety thing. If one of us was traveling or out late, the other could check in. She must have forgotten about it because, sure enough, her location was still enabled. At exactly 7:45 p.m., her little dot moved across the city, straight to a fancy restaurant downtown. Not the office. Not a meeting. I knew where she was. Now I needed to see for myself. I got there around 8 o'clock, parked across the street, and waited. The place had floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind that make a restaurant look warm and intimate from the outside. And there she was, sitting at a candlelit table, laughing, leaning in close to him. Paul. He wasn't just some faceless name in her texts anymore. Now he was real, some smug, well-dressed asshole sitting across from my wife, holding her hand like she was his. I felt frozen. Watching them was like an out-of-body experience. She was glowing, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. It hit me then, she was already gone. Then, as if to drive the knife even deeper, I saw her lift her glass in a toast. Paul clinked his against hers, grinning like he'd won some kind of prize. And then, clear as day, I watched his lips form the words. Happy 2-month anniversary, baby. She beamed, whispered something back, and then she kissed him. Right there. In front of everyone. That was it. That was all I needed. I didn't go inside. I didn't make a scene. I just turned around, walked back to my car, and sat there gripping the wheel so hard my fingers ached. I had my answer. And now, it was time to make my move. I drove home in silence. No music, no podcasts, just the sound of my own breathing and the occasional hum of traffic. My heart was pounding, but my mind was oddly clear. I had seen enough. There was no more guessing, no more, maybe I'm overreacting. She was gone, and she didn't even have the decency to hide it properly. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg for an explanation. I wasn't even going to wait for her to come home. I was going to erase her from my life before she had the chance to feed me any more lies. The first thing I did was grab a few suitcases from the garage. Not for me, for her. One by one, I packed up her things. Clothes, shoes, makeup, all the random little things she left lying around the house. I didn't bother organizing, just threw everything in. She wanted to play house with someone else. Fine. She could do it somewhere else. Then I went for the sentimental stuff. Our wedding album. Gone. The framed photo from our honeymoon. Out. The little love notes she used to leave in my jacket pocket. Straight into the trash. By the time I was done, the house already felt lighter. Emptier. And I wasn't finished. I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled out my laptop. Opened our joint bank account. Transferred half the money into my personal account, the exact amount I had before we got married. She wasn't getting a cent more than what she came in with. Next, I wrote a simple note and left it on top of the suitcases by the door. You made your choice. Now live with it. It was nearly midnight when I finally heard her car pull up. My heart didn't even race. I was calm. I stood there, arms crossed, as she walked through the door, kicking off her heels like it was just another night. Then she saw the suitcases. She froze. Looked at them. Looked at me. Jake, what is this? I just stared at her. You tell me, Emily. Or should I ask Paul? Her face drained of color so fast I thought she might pass out. I waited. Waited for her to come up with some excuse, some pathetic lie. But for once, she had nothing to say. Emily just stood there, staring at the suitcases like they might disappear if she blinked enough times. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right lie fast enough. Jake. I don't, what are you talking about? Her voice was shaking, her hands clutching her purse so tight her knuckles turned white. I laughed. Actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the sheer audacity of her trying to play dumb was almost impressive. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, stepping closer. I saw you. At the restaurant. With him. Her eyes widened in panic. Wait, no, Jake. Happy 2-month anniversary, baby, I mimicked Paul's smug voice, watching as she flinched like I'd slapped her. That ring any bells? Her face twisted, her expression shifting from shock to guilt to something that almost looked like relief. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. Jake, I don't. I held up a hand. I don't want to hear whatever excuse you've been rehearsing. Just admit it. Say the words. She bit her lip, eyes darting around the room like she could find an escape. Then, finally, she exhaled, her shoulders slumping. I'm sorry. I scoffed. For what? Getting caught. She hesitated. For hurting you. For things getting out of hand. I clenched my jaw. Getting out of hand. Like this was some minor misunderstanding. Things didn't just get out of hand, Emily. You didn't trip and land in another man's bed. You made a choice. Over and over again. I gestured to the suitcases. And now, you're going to live with it. Tears welled in her eyes. Jake, please. Can we just talk? You don't understand. I laughed again, colder this time. Oh, I understand perfectly. You've been screwing your boss behind my back while I was planning a damn anniversary trip for us. I understand that just fine. She covered her face with her hands, her breath coming in short gasps. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. But it did, I said, my voice flat. And now, it's over. She sniffled, looking at me like she was waiting for something, some kind of last-minute mercy, some reassurance that I'd fight for her. But I just stepped back, arms crossed. Take your things and go, Emily. Her lip trembled. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Not my problem. Her breath hitched, and for a second, I thought she might fight back, might try to argue, beg, something. But then her shoulders dropped, and she nodded. Okay. Her voice was barely a whisper. And just like that, she picked up her suitcases and walked out the door. I didn't watch her leave. Didn't wait for her to turn around. I just locked the door behind her and let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for months. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The moment the door shut behind Emily, a strange silence filled the house. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that comes after a long day when you finally get to relax. No, this was the heavy, suffocating kind of silence. The kind that follows destruction. I stood there for a while, just staring at the door. My brain felt like it was lagging behind reality, struggling to process the fact that she was gone. And then, just as quickly as the numbness had set in, the anger hit. I wasn't the yelling type. Never had been. But right then, I needed to do something. So I grabbed the closest thing to me, our wedding photo, the one that had been hanging by the bookshelf for years, and threw it against the wall. Glass shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. Good. I didn't stop there. I went through the house, tearing down every reminder of her. The anniversary cards, the little notes she used to leave me, the framed picture of us on vacation. Every single trace of the life I thought we had. Gone. By the time I was done, my hands were shaking, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I wasn't sad. Not yet. That part would come later. Right now, all I felt was rage. Rage at her for doing this. Rage at myself for not seeing it sooner. And beneath all of that, a tiny sliver of satisfaction. She was gone. And I was still here. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down on the couch, and stared at nothing. Then my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought, Emily. Maybe she was going to beg, maybe she had something else to confess. But when I looked at the screen, it wasn't her. It was her mother. I let it ring, watching as her name disappeared. A second later, a text popped up. Jake, I just heard from Emily. Please call me when you can. I sighed, running a hand down my face. Of course she ran to her mom. I wasn't in the mood for more explanations, but something in me, maybe just plain curiosity, made me hit dial. She picked up immediately. Jake, she said, her voice tense. What happened? I took a slow sip of my beer. Why don't you ask your daughter? She hesitated. She told me she made a mistake. That you kicked her out. I let out a dry laugh. A mistake. That's what we're calling a 2-month affair now. Silence. She cheated on me, Linda. With her boss. She was with him tonight, celebrating their little 2-month milestone while I was at home thinking I had a wife who still loved me. Linda exhaled sharply. Oh my God. Yeah, I said bitterly. So forgive me if I don't feel bad about kicking her out. I had no idea, she whispered. And for the first time in all of this, I heard something I didn't expect. Genuine disappointment. Jake, I'm so sorry. I don't even know what to say. Not much to say, I muttered. She was quiet for a while. Then, softer, she asked, "Are you okay?" I closed my eyes. Was I? I will be. And for the first time since this whole nightmare started, I actually believed it. After I hung up with Linda, I just sat there, staring at my phone. She sounded genuinely shocked. Like she truly hadn't expected her daughter to be the type to cheat. Maybe she thought Emily was better than that. Hell, I thought she was better than that. Guess we were both wrong. I took another swig of my beer, debating whether or not to call anyone else. My best friend, Chris, had been telling me for months that Emily was acting off. I should have listened. But before I could decide, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Emily. I let it ring. I had nothing to say to her. A voicemail popped up. I stared at it for a second, then hit play. Her voice came through, quiet, shaky. "Jake, please. Just, please call me. I need to talk to you." A pause. A sniffle. "I know I messed up, but please don't just throw everything away. Just talk to me." I scoffed. Throw everything away? That's rich coming from the person who torched our marriage for some office fling. I deleted the voicemail without a second thought. She had made her choices. And I was making mine. But even as I told myself I was done, I could feel the exhaustion setting in. The weight of it all. I was angry, yeah. But beneath that, there was something else. An ache. I had spent 11 years with this woman. Built a life with her. And now, just like that, she was a stranger to me. I ran a hand over my face, exhaling slowly. My house felt too big, too empty now. I needed air. I grabbed my keys and walked out without a second thought. Drove without a destination, just letting the road stretch out ahead of me. At some point, I ended up in front of Chris's place. I hadn't planned to go there, but I guess my brain knew what I needed before I did. I knocked, and a few seconds later, he opened the door, squinting at me like he couldn't believe I was actually standing there. "Dude," he said, stepping aside. "It's almost 1 a.m. What the hell?" "She cheated," I said flatly. His eyes widened. "Shit." I nodded, stepping inside. "Yeah. Shit." Chris didn't say anything right away. He just stared at me, processing what I had just said. Then, without a word, he grabbed 2 beers from the fridge, popped the caps off, and handed me one. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the couch. I sank into it, the exhaustion finally hitting me like a truck. My body felt heavy, like I hadn't slept in days, which, to be fair, I probably hadn't properly. Chris sat next to me, taking a slow sip of his beer before exhaling. "So," he said. "Tell me everything." And I did. I told him about the late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she had been pulling away for months. I told him about the night I caught her whispering to Rebecca from work, about the messages I found on her laptop, about how I watched her celebrating a 2-month anniversary with Paul like our marriage didn't even exist. Chris listened without interrupting, his expression darkening more with every detail. By the time I got to the part where I packed her bags and kicked her out, he was gripping his beer so tightly I thought the bottle might shatter. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "What a piece of shit." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, tell me about it." He shook his head, eyes still burning with anger. "And she actually had the nerve to leave you a voicemail asking you to talk." I scoffed. "Yup. Like I'm the one who needs to reconsider things." Chris ran a hand down his face. "I knew something was off with her, man. I didn't want to push it too much, but, shit. I should have said something sooner." I shook my head. "Wouldn't have mattered. I wouldn't have believed it. Not until I saw it with my own eyes. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything settling between us. Then Chris turned to me, his expression serious. So what now? I sighed, leaning back against the couch. Divorce, obviously. I already took my name off our joint account. She can keep the house if she wants it. I don't want to live in a place filled with memories of her. Chris nodded approvingly. Good. Don't let her drag this out. The sooner you cut her off, the better. I took a deep breath, rolling the beer bottle between my hands. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's weird. One minute I'm furious, the next I feel nothing. Chris patted my shoulder. That's normal. You just went through a goddamn war. But trust me, you'll feel better once you've got everything finalized. And in the meantime? He stood up, walking over to his gaming setup. We're gonna play some Call of Duty and you're gonna shoot some virtual people until you feel less like punching a wall. I huffed a laugh, shaking my head. That your professional therapy advice? Yup. He tossed me a controller. Now shut up and queue up. And for the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. The next morning, I woke up on Chris's couch with a stiff neck and a half-empty beer bottle on the coffee table. For the first time in what felt like forever, my first thought wasn't about Emily. That thought came a few seconds later, but still, progress. Chris was already awake, scrolling through his phone when I sat up with a groan. He looked over and smirked. You snore like a damn chainsaw, dude. Yeah, well, I slept like garbage even before my wife blew up our marriage, so I guess that tracks. He tossed me a bottle of water. Drink. You look like hell. I took a sip, rubbing my face. I need to get started on the divorce. Chris nodded. Good. You talked to a lawyer yet? Not yet. That's my first move today. And it was. I drove home, my home, not hers, and made some calls. Found a divorce attorney with good reviews and set up a consultation for the next day. The thought of seeing Emily again, dealing with paperwork, and dividing assets made me want to put my fist through a wall, but I knew the faster I got this done, the better. Halfway through sorting out my finances, my phone buzzed. Emily. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, another text popped up. Emily, please, Jake. Just talk to me. Then another. Emily, I know I hurt you. But we were together for 11 years. You can't just shut me out like this. Oh, but I could. I blocked her number. A few hours later, another text came through, from an unknown number. Emily, really? You're blocking me? Are we in high school? I stared at the screen, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. She still didn't get it. So I sent one final message before blocking that number too. Me, you made your choice. Now live with it. And just like that, I was done. For real this time. Blocking Emily felt good. Not in a petty, revengeful way, just necessary. Like cutting out a tutor before it spreads. I spent the rest of the day focusing on me for the first time in a long time. Went to the gym, lifted heavier than I had in years. Came home, made an actual meal instead of just eating whatever was in the fridge. Hell, I even cleaned the place up, removing the last traces of her. No more of Emily's clothes hanging in the closet. No more of her stupid shampoo bottles in the shower. This was my house now. Then, just as I was starting to feel good, like I was finally in control of my life again, my doorbell rang. I had a feeling before I even looked through the peephole. And sure enough, there she was. Emily. Her eyes were puffy, like she'd been crying. She had a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, like she was expecting to be let in. I didn't open the door right away. I just stood there, watching her shift uncomfortably. Finally, I cracked it open, just enough to let her know I was not about to invite her inside. "What do you want, Emily?" She swallowed hard, her lip trembling. "Jake, please. I don't have anywhere to go. I just need to talk to you." I raised an eyebrow. "You don't have Paul's place for that." She flinched. "I'm not staying with him." "Not my problem," I said, keeping my voice cold. "We're done, Emily. You don't get to cheat on me for months and then come crawling back because your boyfriend won't take you in." She took a shaky breath. "Jake, please. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I almost shut the door in her face right then and there. But a small part of me, the part that spent 11 damn years loving this woman, wanted to hear what she had to say. So, against my better judgment, I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. "You've got 5 minutes," I said, crossing my arms. "Start talking." She wiped her eyes. "I messed up. I know I did. And I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand." I laughed bitterly. "Understand what, exactly?" She hesitated. "Then, finally, Paul's married." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She sniffled. "I didn't know. I swear, Jake, I didn't know. He told me he was single. He told me he wanted a future with me." She let out a shaky breath. "And then, the second I told him I left, he shut me out. Said he was never going to leave his wife." I blinked, letting that sink in. So that was why she was here. Not because she regretted cheating. Not because she wanted to fix things. Because she got played. And now, she had no one. I shook my head, disgusted. "You seriously expect me to feel sorry for you?" She let out a weak sob. "I don't know. I have nowhere to go, Jake. My mom's furious, and I thought maybe." "No," I said immediately. "Absolutely not." Her face crumpled. "Jake, please." I turned and opened the door just enough to step back inside. "Goodbye, Emily." And then, without another word, I shut the door in her face. I didn't watch her leave. Didn't wait to hear if she'd knock again. I just locked the door, exhaled, and walked away. For the first time in months, I felt free. After I shut the door in Emily's face, I stood there for a few seconds, waiting. I half expected her to start pounding on the door, screaming, demanding I let her in. But she didn't. Instead, after a few moments of silence, I heard her shuffle away. A car door opened, then slammed shut. The sound of an engine starting. And just like that, she was gone. And for the first time in a long time, I let out a breath that didn't feel heavy. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. Emily wasn't my problem anymore. That realization should have hurt, but instead, it felt like relief. I went back inside, grabbed another beer from the fridge, and sat down on the couch. Let myself just exist for a while. And then, because I was curious, I did something I hadn't done in years. I logged back into my old social media accounts. See, Emily had always been the "we post everything together" type, and I had gone along with it, until a couple of years ago when I got sick of it and deactivated. She had made a big deal out of it, saying it looked bad for me to not have an online presence. But I never cared. Now, I was suddenly in the mood to reconnect with the world. On my terms. The second I logged in, I had a flood of messages. Friends I hadn't talked to in years reaching out. Some had heard rumors about the split. Others had no idea but wanted to catch up. And then, a message from someone I really didn't expect. "Samantha, hey, Jake. I know it's been a while, but I just saw what happened. I'm really sorry. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. Samantha. An old friend. And if I was being honest, the one that got away. We had been close before I met Emily, maybe too close. But then, once I started dating Emily, she slowly faded out of my life. Emily never liked her. Said she was too flirty. Looking back, I think she just didn't like the competition. I stared at the message for a second before typing back. Hey, Sam. It's been a long time. I'd love to catch up. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I actually felt excited about something. Samantha and I texted back and forth for a bit, just catching up. Nothing heavy, no deep dives into the mess that was my marriage. Just two old friends reconnecting. It felt good. She suggested we meet up for a drink sometime, and for the first time in years, I actually wanted to say yes. Not in a rebound kind of way, just as a way to remind myself that life didn't end with Emily. So we made plans for the weekend. But before I could even let myself enjoy the idea of moving on, I had one last bit of unfinished business, meeting with the lawyer. The next morning, I walked into the law office feeling more determined than ever. The attorney, a no-nonsense guy named Mark, listened as I laid everything out. The affair. The finances. The fact that I had already moved all my money into a personal account before she could drain it. Smart move, he said with a nod. You don't want this getting dragged out. Luckily, since you don't have kids, this should be fairly straightforward. That was the only silver lining in all of this. No custody battles. No long, drawn-out fights. Just clean separation. I told him I didn't care about the house. Emily could keep it if she wanted. I just wanted out. He took some notes, asked a few more questions, then leaned back in his chair. Okay, he said. If she cooperates, this could be wrapped up within a few months. If she fights it, could take longer. I nodded. She won't fight it. I knew Emily well enough to know that she'd want this over just as quickly as I did. She wasn't the type to drag things out once she realized she'd lost. By the time I walked out of that office, the paperwork was already in motion. It was real now. I was getting my life back. And for the first time in a long time, I was actually looking forward to what came next. The divorce papers were sent to Emily that same week. I didn't wait around for her reaction, didn't care how she felt about it. She had already shown me exactly what I meant to her. But she didn't drag it out. She didn't try to negotiate or make things difficult. 2 days later, she signed the papers and sent them back. No dramatic confrontation. No last-ditch effort to fix things. Just silence. It was over. I expected to feel something, maybe relief, maybe sadness, but mostly. I just felt done. Like I had been carrying this heavy weight on my chest for months, and now it was finally gone. Chris came over that night with a bottle of whiskey, and we drank to my newfound freedom. Dude, you realize you're officially a single man now, he said, pouring me another glass. How's it feel? I thought about it for a second, rolling the glass between my hands. It feels like I just woke up from a really shitty dream. He smirked. Well, you're awake now. Time to start living again. And for the first time in a long time, I actually wanted to. The next morning, I packed a small bag and drove out to the mountains. Just me, a cabin, and no responsibilities for the weekend. No more stress. No more fights. No more wondering what Emily was up to. Just me. On the second night, I got a text from Samantha. Samantha, still up for that drink this weekend? I smiled. Yeah. I think I am. The weekend in the mountains was exactly what I needed. No noise, no drama, just fresh air, long hikes, and a chance to actually breathe for the first time in what felt like years. I wasn't running away from anything. I was just, living. And when I drove back into town, I felt different. Lighter. Like the worst of it was finally behind me. That night, I met up with Samantha for drinks. I won't lie, I was nervous. Not because I had feelings for her, at least, not yet, but because this was the first time I was sitting across from someone without a wife waiting at home. Except there was no home to go back to. Just me. And I was okay with that. Samantha smiled as she stirred her cocktail. So, you survived the worst breakup of your life. What's next for you? I took a sip of my whiskey, thinking. Honestly? I don't know. And for the first time in a long time, I'm okay with that. She grinned. That's a good answer. We talked for hours, not just about Emily but about everything else. Life. Work. Stupid memories from years ago. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized something. I was happy. Not because of Samantha. Not because I was trying to replace Emily. But because, for the first time in years, I wasn't stuck in a miserable marriage. I wasn't questioning my worth. I wasn't chasing someone who didn't give a damn about me. I was free. And it felt damn good. If you're reading this and going through something similar, let me tell you this, you will survive. It won't be easy. It will hurt like hell. But one day, you'll wake up, take a deep breath, and realize that the worst is behind you. And that's when life really begins.